Power packed, Jason.
Yeah, I know. It's it's here. They're here to wake you up before lunch. So hello, thank you very much for joining us for today's HR series webinar, Retaining Talent in the New World of Work. Today's presenters are Bob Lavinia, who's the Director of the Institute for Public Sector of Employee Engagement, and Melissa Asher, who's in charge of CPS HR Consulting's recruitment, as well as training and development practices. The session will be recorded. We'll post a link to the recording on the webinar page of our website, which is cpshr.us/webinars. In order to ensure a high quality recording, all attendees are encouraged to mute your mic. You're actually in listen only mode. If you have any questions for Melissa or Bob, please put them in the Q&A or in the chat. And I'll do my best to moderate those questions. We'll probably get to them after the presentation. And with that, let's get started. Hand it over to you, Bob.
Thanks very much, Jason. Good morning or good afternoon, depending upon where you are. We have folks who have registered for this webinar from all over the country. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. My colleague Melissa Asher is in Sacramento, as is Jason. So we're very pleased that you've joined us today. Melissa and I are really excited about this session. I'd like to start by saying that I believe the biggest challenge facing most organizations, but maybe particularly the public sector, is attracting, developing, engaging, and retaining talent. Because in government, and our organization is a government agency, we can't get anything done unless we have talent, the right people with the right skills in the right places at the right times. We can have great ideas, sound policies, cutting edge technology, but if we don't have people to execute on those ideas and policies and manage that technology, we can't be successful. And we talk a lot and devote a lot of time and resources in government to attracting and hiring people, but much less focus on retaining those folks that we bring into our organization. So that's going to be the focus of our conversation with you today. So we're going to cover four things. We'll talk about the new world of work. What are some of the characteristics of the world that we've been experiencing for about 15 months that we believe is going to continue even as we emerge from the pandemic? Talk about what the golden rule of retention is, and I won't preview that until we get to that portion of the presentation. What are some of the challenges that we in the public sector face in retaining talent? And of course, the flip side of challenge is opportunity. So what are some of the opportunities? How can we leverage the environment, the conditions that we're operating in right now to make sure that we are retaining, not just have a high level of retention, but we're retaining the people, the right people in our organizations. So let's talk a little bit about the new world of work. You know, some believe that the migration to remote work, and millions of people were working remotely before the pandemic, now tens of millions are working remotely, was a short-term response to a national crisis. But we believe, and we're not the only ones who are saying this, that it is really a permanent evolution in where and how we do work. The employee expectation is that their employers will continue to provide them with the same kind of flexibility that they have experienced over the last 15 or so months. And that means that there's going to be more competition for talent. Organizations that meet these expectations are going to have an advantage in attracting and retaining talent. Organizations that don't meet these expectations are going to be at an extreme disadvantage in attracting and retaining talent. Talk a little bit about the two sort of categories of employees that have emerged over the last 15 months. People who are able to work remotely, but then particularly in the public sector, employees have been designated as essential. We don't really like that term. We think all public sector employees are essential, but people who have had to continue to report to their work sites, risking their health and sometimes even their lives. You know, we hear a lot about private sector companies, including in high tech, that have gone completely remote. Well, we know we can't do that in the public sector. People in public works, library, parks, police, fire, and so on can't work remotely. they have to continue to report to their work sites and will have to continue to report to their work sites. So we have to make sure that we are treating both types of employees equitably. And then different benefits, counseling, expanded wellness benefits. We'll talk a little bit about those. This is the new world of work. And we believe, and as I said, many others do as well, that this new environment is here to stay. Not a short-term solution, but a long-term evolution. Last year at CPS, we did a national survey to understand how public sector employees were feeling about this new working environment and how they were feeling about how their organizations are adapting to the new work environment. We received almost 20,000 responses from public sector employees across the country. We were astounded by the response that we received. This is an image of the cover of the report that we produced. Happy to send you a copy of it. Just reach out to us and we'll email you a copy at no charge. One of the things we asked is, tell us how you feel in 3 words or less. Again, almost 20,000 public sector employees from organizations across the country. And this word cloud shows how those employees responded. Really no surprise here, right? Anxious, tired, stressed. Some said they were feeling pretty good. Some said they were grateful, hopeful, but the overwhelming response was anxious, tired, and stressed. And even though we conducted the survey last year, our work that continues with public sector organizations across the country suggests that people are still feeling some of these emotions, maybe even more so now than they did last year, because we've been operating in this environment for over 15 months. So we're going to do a little audience participation now. One of the questions we asked through this survey, the people who responded, was, for those who are working remotely for the first time, how many of you want to continue to work remotely, at least part-time? So we're showing you 5 responses from 0 to 100%. What we'd like you to do, and Jason will manage this process, is tell us what you think the answer is. What percentage of public sector employees, again, 20,000 responses, want to continue to work remotely at least part-time? So select one of these 5 options, and then we'll display the results. And then we'll show you what our survey respondents said. And I'm not going to vote because I know the answer.
Count 'em down. 14 more people to vote, Bob.
Okay. We want everyone to vote, but only once.
Twenty more seconds. Get your votes in. Close the poll.
Okay, so it looks like the plurality, 43%, selected 61 to 80%, followed by 20%, 81 to 100%. 3% said 0 to 20%. So this is what our survey respondents said. When I can return to work, 57% want to do it part-time, 28% want to do it full-time, and the remaining 12% either want to go back to their work site or believe that they can't work remotely. So 85% in that 80 to 100% category said once the pandemic subsides and they can go back to their work sites, they want to continue to work remotely at least part-time. And this is very consistent with what other organizations are learning when they have done surveys. Federal government, 28% of federal employees, 2.1 million federal employees, the nation's largest workforce, said they would quit if not allowed to continue to work remotely at least part-time. Read an article the other day, it was either in Fortune or Forbes, national poll, 2,000 respondents, 36% of the respondents said once the coronavirus restrictions are over, they will be looking for other work, either because they don't think their employers will allow them to continue working remotely, or they've used this 15-month period to really think about what's important to them, what their skills are, where they want to be, and what they want to do. And that has prompted them to say, I want to go somewhere else. Again, this new world of work is here to stay. So the golden rule of retention, I said I wasn't going to tell you what it was until we got to the slide. Well, we're there now. The golden rule of retention is look behind the numbers. It's not just how many are staying or leaving. It's who, whom is staying or leaving. Sometimes organizations will say, well, we have a very low turnover rate. It's only 8 or 9%, which is typical of the public sector. But what does that mean? It doesn't really mean anything unless we look into the numbers. We do a deep dive to understand who's staying or leaving. Are the people we want to stay staying, or the people who we want to leave staying? So how do we do that? How do we figure that out, who's staying or leaving? We take a look at the turnover. We take a look at who's leaving. Are the good performers leaving, or are the poorer performers leaving? How about demographically? Are newer, younger employees leaving? If we're having a high level of turnover among new employees, something's going on, and we need to figure out what's going on. Is it the onboarding process? Is it something else? Other demographic groups, gender, race, and ethnicity, veterans. Are people leaving in higher rates than others? And if so, we need to take a look at what is going on. Look behind the overall numbers, specific occupations or levels. Are we losing people in key occupations or at key levels? Look across the organization. Are individual departments or divisions experiencing higher turnover than others? And if so, why? And certain pay levels could indicate certainly that there is a compensation issue. Don't know the answers unless we ask the questions, unless we drill down on the data. It's not enough just to look at overall turnover. We have to understand who is staying and who is leaving. So how do we do that? Well, as I mentioned, drill down on the turnover data. Be as precise as possible, not just overall turnover, 8, 9, 10%, but what is the turnover by department, by division, by demographic group, by age group, etc. If you do exit interviews, stay interviews, analyze the results. Why are people who are leaving saying why they left in exit interviews? Stay interviews where we sit down with employees and we talk to them about why they're staying with the organization. What is it about this organization that motivates you to stay with the organization? You know, exit interviews can provide important data points, but they're sort of the ultimate lagging indicator, right? People who are out the door or already at the door. But stay interviews give us a sense of what people feel good about in the organization. Focus groups, bring small groups of employees together and have some conversations. You know, what is it that keeps you here? What is it that you think motivates other people to leave? And engagement surveys. At the Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement, one of the questions we typically ask in an engagement survey is, do you plan to stay or leave in the next year? And we break the data down so that we can understand what the levels of engagement are in the various categories of people who are saying they're either planning to stay or they're planning to leave. Do they want a different position in the same organization? Do they want to stay in the city or county but just work in another department? Do they want to stay in the public sector but leave their current organization? Do they want to go to the private sector? Do they want to retire? We analyze the levels of engagement by each of those categories to give the organization the data it needs to understand what's going on and what potentially could be the turnover. And then conduct pulse surveys. Don't just do a survey at a specific moment in time as a one-off, but do it periodically so we understand what's going on in our workforce. So drill down on the data, collect data from a variety of sources so you have a good understanding, not just of your overall turnover, but who's leaving, who's staying. And this is something we often hear, and there's actually some data that support this. Employees often are not quitting their organizations, they're quitting their bosses, which is one of the reasons why when we do employee engagement surveys nationally or for individual organizations that we work with, we almost always find that leadership is a key driver of engagement. So what are the challenges? I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges, and I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, because the flip side of challenge is opportunity, and she's going to talk about the opportunities. So the challenges, I suggested this earlier, the haves and the have-nots are essential employees, folks who must continue to report to their work sites. Do they consider themselves the have-nots because their colleagues who don't have to report to their work sites are working from their dens, wearing sweatpants, dealing with their kids and their personal lives, having the ultimate flexibility, whereas they have to continue to report to their work sites. We have to guard against creating two categories of employees, the haves and the have-nots. What's our policy about workplace flexibility? Do we have one? What are we going to be doing when it is possible, as it is in many states right now, to return to the work site? What is our policy? We've talked to organizations that are desperate for their city or their county or their state to come up with a policy so that they can plan how they're going to move forward. Work-life balance, whether it's employees working remotely have to deal with all kinds of interruptions, or people who continue to report to their work sites and have to worry about their kids going to school and maybe their significant others being home and not being able to work. And ensuring equity, making sure we're treating employees fairly. Fair doesn't mean the same, but it does mean making sure that we're understanding the needs of our employees, whether they're remote, essential, and we're meeting those needs. Expanded benefits, wellness. I know we all have EAP programs, but over the course of the last 15 months, many organizations have had to expand those programs to provide remote counseling, provide financial counseling for those employees maybe who have a significant other or spouse who is out of work and are struggling financially, providing childcare for employees whose kids are not able to go to school, training and developing employees, and I know Melissa's going to talk a lot about that, but not ignoring training and development as we scramble to get our work done in this new environment, continuing because that is a key driver of engagement and retention, employee development. And onboarding and supervising remote workers. How do we onboard people when we can't be with them in person? And how do we coach our supervisors so that they can manage remote workers? They can't just walk down the hallway to make sure that people are working. Sometimes our supervisors, that's the way they supervise. Time and attendance. We have to transition to supervising based on results and outcomes. And then a looming retirement wave. I'm going to show you some data there. You know, we've been talking about this retirement tsunami for like 10 or 15 years, and some have experienced it, but we're experiencing maybe the second wave of that tsunami. This is some data from the Center for State and Local Government Excellence, conducted a survey of HR directors in cooperation with IPMA HR and National Association of State Personnel Executives, asked these HR directors and leaders, when do you expect retirements to take place? This is very interesting. 52% said the bulk of retirement is going to take place in the next few years. 17% said it's happening right now. So 69% are anticipating a wave. 14% said we don't think there's going to be a wave. 9% don't know. And only 8% say it has already taken place. So we are on the cusp, on the verge of what looks like a retirement bulge, which puts even more pressure on retaining talented employees. So I'm going to defer now to Melissa. I'm going to advance the slides, but she's now going to talk about, as I mentioned, the flip side of challenge is opportunity.
Absolutely. We really want to spend most of the rest of our time with you about the opportunity. I think we've laid out some really compelling information about how the world has changed and how our workforce and our ability to attract and retain has changed. It's never going to be quite the same again. So go ahead, reveal, Bob, our quote here. Yeah, remote work can do two things for you to help to create opportunity for you. Really, it can expand your ability to attract talent, and then mostly what we're going to talk about today, and that is retaining talent. So on our next slide, we want to spend just a minute on expanding your search. So this whole notion about how our current work environment and remote work can help you at your organizations. As Bob said, and in the recruitment work that we do, we are seeing a ton of openings. There's a lot of movement. There are a lot of retirements. There are a lot of people rethinking and changing and moving and choosing a different career, a different job. So one of the things that can be helpful to you is that you can expand your search by not being constrained by geography. Just imagine not being restricted by that. And we've talked with a lot of clients, and so we're not necessarily talking about hiring maybe international talent or even maybe talent out of your state, which can sometimes optically not be the best look, but absolutely expanding your search within your county, within your region, even within your state. We're doing work now with several state of California agencies, helping them recruit some very specialized positions, and they've opened up the whole California. So really looking at a much more expanded search to find the type of talent that you need. And our next point, you're going to need to do this because you're going to have to compete with the private sector. We always somewhat competed with the private sector, but now here's another tool for us to be able to be more competitive. We can offer flexible work schedules that will help us bring in the right talent. Lastly, on this particular point, we just did also want to point out, you've probably seen this, we certainly have, with our hiring processes, both ours internally and those we are doing for our clients, the process has been sped up. We have a lot more ability to automate pieces of the process, whether that's the Zoom meetings, which are super handy and very convenient for panel members as well as candidates, more cost effective, less travel involved. We can automate more of the testing and assessment piece of this. Again, speeds it up. And instead of maybe the cattle call in-person job fairs, we've seen a move towards virtual job fairs. So yes, a concerted effort, but you bring everybody together in that virtual space. It's very efficient. It's very effective. So that's one piece of the opportunity. But let's get to the retention opportunities, the flip side of what Bob was talking about. So definitely we're going to be delving into increasing flexibility. This work-life balance, people want to have more wellness, and kind of that wellness is wrapped around better managing work and personal commitments and not in the traditional way. So a lot of times that may lead to adopting a hybrid work schedule. We're seeing a lot of this. If you are not looking into this in your organization, you are really missing the boat. This is a really key opportunity to retain and also attract when you're hiring new folks in. We're going to talk about onboarding effectively. What does that look like so that can maximize retention? And then we do want to be sensitive to the needs of all of your employees. So really being concerned about the different types of needs, an essential person who maybe has to always be reporting on the job in the office or in the field versus those remote employees. A couple more for you here on these opportunities. Recognizing employee contributions is really an underutilized tool for retention, as well as providing training and development opportunities near and dear to my heart and much more affordable these days. And then, of course, one of the biggest tools that you have is to build and maximize employee engagement. So we've just listed really 7 opportunities, and we wanted to do a quick poll and see for these opportunities which of which sound most valuable to you? So there's a lot in there. Which of the two, pick your top two, do you think sound most valuable to you and your organization? We'll just give it a little bit of time here. Get your thoughts, pick your top two. Curious to see what the group thinks, where they think the biggest opportunities may be. How is our selection looking, Jason?
We've got about 22% that have not finished yet.
Okay.
15% that are still working on it.
Right. Well, we want to hear from you. We want to see, across this group who've come together today to convene around this important topic. What do you think are the biggest opportunities? It's always fun to kind of see what everybody's thinking. All right, Jason. Well, let's close it out. Let's see what we got.
We got two that are still working. Hold on.
Okay. I'm anxious to see.
20-second warning. 20-second warning. You're anxious.
I am. I'm curious.
I already know the answers. I see them coming in on my end before I share the results.
Oh.
Okay. Here we go. Poll will close in just a few seconds.
All right. Okay.
Survey says.
So wow, nice mix here. Increased flexibility, edges out 41% there. Adopting hybrid work schedules 40%. I'm going to kind of put those two in the same bucket because those can be obviously very related. So that's like 80% of you are really tuned into that opportunity. Also building and maximizing engagement, 24%, training and development, 21%. But I see everything got a nod, so we couldn't agree with you more. We think all of these are excellent opportunities for you. So let's delve a little deeper into those 7, and we'll start here with work-life balance. This has definitely emerged as a key retention sticking point. A 1,000-person poll done in May by Bloomberg News found that 39% said that they'd consider quitting their job if their employer didn't allow them some remote work flexibility. And that really mirrors what Bob was saying. I mean, this is key. People have rethought the way they like to do work and where they like to do work and how they can get work done. And we've really proved over this last 15 months that a lot of work can be done remotely that we previously were a little bit jury's out on. So definitely start looking into some policies, revising previous telework policies, maybe keeping policies that you created during this pandemic in place, maybe even expanding them. We're doing work with a couple of agencies, a couple of local government agencies where we've been doing focus groups to get a feel for what their employees are looking for. And hybrid schedules are popping out as a huge opportunity for people, huge opportunities for employees. The other piece to this kind of managing work-life balance, and we're going to talk about supervisors specifically, but it is around managing to results. So this is a bit of a mind shift change, moving to output and outcomes instead of time in the seat, and being more intentional with the way that we manage, because people are balancing a lot of other things in their lives, and that may be okay if they're going to take an hour off here or an hour off there. So being a little bit more considerate of some of those life interruptions and being a little bit more intentional about how we engage with our employees to stay connected with them. So a little more formalized sometimes with our scheduling. I think this next slide is something we can probably all relate to. Go ahead, Bob, give us the next slide here, which talks about, the change that we've talked about. So, and why this work-life balance and this need for flexibility is important. You know, we have employees who might have kids that they need to take an hour off to put someone down for a nap or to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Heck, I need time off to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? I mean, so being flexible to allow for these other types of shorter work life types of interruptions that do not keep us, of course, from doing our job and keep us on track from those outcomes and those outputs that we are driving towards. So make sure that you are exploring flexible work schedules. What does that look like? What's reasonable? What do your employees want? Onboarding is key. This is one of those tried and true retention strategies. Bob and I love to talk about this topic, and it's a good onboarding program. That's right, program which spans from before the first day in the job all the way through that first year. Very intentional process, goes way beyond just the HR department helping with new hire paperwork. We recommend 5 phases. They're on the slide for you, and discrete activities at each of the phases. It's really about integrating the new employee into the culture, into the mission, into the purpose, and into the colleagues across the organization. With your new hires, putting this time in up front really brings them into the organization in a way that they feel valued, in a way that they get to be able to contribute quickly. And in that way, the research has shown once they feel valued and once they are contributing, once they feel a part of the bigger purpose and they feel integrated into their teams, they're much more likely to stay longer. So our next topic we want to talk about is meeting the needs of all of your employees. And this retention opportunity is rather specific to the environment we are in because, as we talked about earlier, we have and anticipate continuing to have a mix of employees who will be returning to the office on a either full-time or largely full-time status versus those who perhaps can be 100% or at least part-time remote. So as we have this dichotomy of these two types of employees coming in, Bob kind of described them as the haves and have-nots. We need to be really sensitive to that because all work is not equal. You know, a police officer's job is very different than a front counter person's job, but we need to be able to acknowledge that. We need to be able to address equity issues. That's how a lot of these are coming up as equity issues, and really make sure we're thinking about what are the various roles, what are the responsibilities. The job is going to drive that interaction with the customer. That might mean face-to-face in an office or out in the field versus another job that is a call center employee that can pretty much do their job wholly remotely. So really being attuned to that. We've got Maslow's hierarchy pyramid there too. At the bottom, you've got your basic needs. So safety is going to probably continue to be a concern for people. So again, being sensitive to that, addressing that, being really attuned to the local rules and procedures around the pandemic and those types of safety concerns. Linking work back to the mission is going to be one really key way to keep everyone engaged, to make sure that they are on track with the work that they're doing and the customers that they're serving. One of the other things that we've seen customers start to do here is to really put out there the reasons to go back to the office, because there are actually a lot of reasons to come back. Does that mean you have to come back full time? Maybe not, but there are a lot of benefits to collaboration, to teamwork, to preserving that culture in your organization. So discuss those reasons, get ahead of that, put out an FAQ, put out some sort of a communication to remind people of why it is good to return and be connected at least maybe once a week. I don't know, whatever that remote work schedule might look like. Important to address this. And a key group that can help on our next slide is really the supervisors. So getting the supervisors really on board with what this new environment looks like. Again, the opportunities within this new environment. Again, I've mentioned some work we were doing with a local jurisdiction recently, and we talked to various different groups see executive level employees and this group of supervisors about what they thought about the ability to continue working remotely. And I got to tell you, the supervisors were the most optimistic about it. So this group has seen a lot of benefits from being able to have flexible work schedules, and they are really attuned to wanting to maintain those. They see what it does in terms of morale for their workers, and they want it to continue. A little bit of re-education with our supervisors, though. Again, back to not managing time, we're managing outcomes, we're focusing on the results, and a really important piece is setting those expectations. And that gets back to kind of what we talked about with work-life balance, setting those expectations for when an employee will be available. They need to be available for their own work, but probably they have to be available for other employees too. In the world of work today, we're working in teams. We're often working on projects. So what are those expectations for availability and for turning out the work product and the deadlines? It might even involve some creative job redesign, right? So supervisors can help this. They can see, you know, what parts of jobs maybe can be done more flexibly and maybe help move people around, give people some other opportunities. That's going to really increase retention when employees see that supervisors are really actively looking at the jobs and the employee needs and putting those together. All of this, of course, involves a whole lot of communication, and we're going to talk more specifically about appreciation and recognition. To make this happen, on our next slide, we really have to talk about tools, right? So in several of these, we've talked about the flexible work schedules, hybrid schedules, work-life balance. I mean, we need to have the right tools in place. This came out loud and clear in the study that Bob talked about earlier. You have to have broadband, you have to have internet, you have to have things like a printer. Printer came out as one of the biggies that people were thinking, you know, in order to do our jobs now, we need maybe a printer at home. Maybe we need a scanner. There are lots and lots of ways that we can start moving into a more of a paperless environment if people are using laptops more. We're seeing a lot of employees switch to laptops so that an employee can take it home to work, or they can come in and dock it in their docking station at the office and have the ability to work effectively in both. So take a look at your technology. You know, what kind of infrastructure do you want to shore up? You did it, you know, overnight last March. Now we can be more thoughtful about what does this look like going forward. And then there are some other more maybe paper-based or tried and true tools. We've got a planning worksheet. This tool can be very handy. For instance, employees and supervisors can use this to set those expectations and to identify measures of success. This is really getting to that intentional management, a tool to use to be able to set those expectations, to be able to have regular check-ins. So you build up that trust no matter where that employee is working. Another tool we want to share with you is just a communication plan template. This might be helpful for supervisors on a project team. Certainly if you're doing a change management initiative, which moving into whatever the hybrid work situation will absolutely involve some change management. So here's a template that helps you kind of plot out who do we need to communicate with, what is our message, what is our method, and who is going to deliver that. So just another tool for you. Before we move to our next one, we also wanted to share with you the City of Henderson a little bit. No, you're right, Bob. The City of Henderson, a little bit about this remarkable city. They are just a great case study for both retention as well as engagement. And during the pandemic, they utilized numerous new strategies to engage and retain people. We have 9 of them here in the various boxes on the screen. A couple I wanted to mention specifically because they really reinforce some of the points we've talked about earlier. The bi-weekly virtual supervisors meetings, they really paid attention to the group of supervisors. They really wanted to make sure that they had the information they needed, that they had the forum to be able to talk through different issues and to share different solutions as they popped up throughout the pandemic. So very, very powerful tool to empower your supervisors. Definitely a focus on wellness here. You'll see several of these talk about wellness activities on site. That's a great way to bring people in, but wellness articles and information shared as well in that virtual space. So again, you really see that mix of on-site and online in that virtual environment, focusing on wellness. Let's make sure our employees are healthy. Let's make sure we're giving them what they need to be able to do their jobs and not have issues around health. Another kind of interesting one is around encouraging volunteerism. And that one, yes, was about keeping the employees in paid status. So they value of serving the community by letting employees volunteer and letting them use their own PTO for that. But we do need to move on, as Bob has indicated. So employee recognition, this one really matters. And this one is so easy to do. We've got stats. I won't, read them to you, but it's very compelling. And we like to always use data when we're doing these presentations to really drive home, why this particular item is important. It really makes a difference in people staying. And the cool thing about this is that you can do it on a dime. So we've got several different things for you to think about, ways to use recognition within your organization. I definitely know employees who have hung on to notes of thanks for years. Just a simple note, a post-it note of thanks, recognizing someone at a staff meeting. If you have a bulletin board, using that as a forum to just say, hey, Jason, you did such a great job helping me, made a difference for serving the customer. Those types of things are really meaningful. And if you can compliment employees within earshot of others, boy, that word spreads. That employee will tell somebody else. It really is a very positive, reinforcing strategy to use recognition. Couple more here, some of the same things around a handwritten note, maybe a department-wide email, using meetings to recognize employees. We have a general staff meeting. A part of that general staff meeting, we always recognize, we call them shout outs, we always recognize employees who've been actually singled out by their peers. So important to keep in mind that recognition just isn't the supervisor always. It can be peer-to-peer recognition as well. I want to move on to training and development. This one is near and dear to my heart as working in our training and development division. Something important to know here, and you probably know this already, but if you don't, skills really are the new currency today. There's a quote I read, good jobs were ones with a good salary, benefits, etc. Now it's one that prepares you for your next job. Well, let's prepare them for the next job within your organization. Let's retain them and grow them and help them move into positions within your organization. People recognize that the life of a skill is much shorter now. It used to be you had a set of skills you used in the workplace and they were good for 10, 20 years. That's not the case anymore. And they're probably only good for about 5 years. So if you think about that, learning new skills is going to be extremely important going forward. And it's very underutilized, again, in the public sector. The average spend is about $1,300 per employee, according to Association of Talent Development. And that might seem like a lot, but if you compare that to the cost of turnover or to the cost of recruiting someone in, it's a very small cost. So a little investment in succession planning, doing the emerging leaders program, leadership development programs, doing 360 assessments, individual development plans are going to be worth their weight in gold. And so many are affordable options today. LinkedIn Learning, something like $29 a month. There's tons of free training opportunities out there for your employees. So really encourage you to take advantage of that. Well, I want to turn it over to Bob now because one of our very favorite opportunities is, of course, employee engagement.
Thanks very much, Melissa. Great stuff. And as Melissa said, one of the ways, and many of you identified this, to drive retention is maximizing employee engagement. Employees who feel good about what they do and their contribution are much more likely to stay with the organization. You know, that makes common sense, but there are also decades of research proving it. So what is engagement? It's really about creating the environment and the conditions for employees to have a strong and heightened connection between the work they do and the mission of the organization. Engaged employees are proud of what they do. They feel the organization values them, and in return, they're willing to deliver what is known in the research as discretionary effort, which is just a fancy term that means they're willing to do whatever it takes to help the organization succeed. And engagement really goes above and beyond satisfaction. Employees can be satisfied because their compensation is fair. We hope it is. Benefits are good. Benefits still are pretty good in the public sector. And their workloads are reasonable. We want people to feel good about those things, but we also want them to take that next step up to go from satisfaction to engagement. So we think of satisfaction as necessary, but not sufficient for engagement. And someone mentioned to me when I was doing a session like this that when they think of engagement, they think of it as the opposite of employee burnout. So that's another way to think of it. And here is from our old friend Dilbert. Boss says, we need what the management experts call employee engagement. Says, I don't know the details. Something to do with you idiots working harder for the same pay. Dilbert says, is anything different on your end? And the boss says, I think I'm supposed to be happier. So as Dilbert often shows us, this is the way not to approach employee engagement. Here are some of the behaviors that engaged employees demonstrate. And as you think about yourselves, probably wouldn't be here today with us unless you were engaged. And the people you work with, I hope some of these resonate with you. And I like to mention two of them. Of course, the one most relevant to our discussion today is engaged employees are much more likely to stay with the organization, even if they can make more money elsewhere. And I'll show you some research that supports that in a moment. Engaged employees also recommend the organization as a good place to work. They say good things about where they work, in their networks, in their communities, with their neighbors. And this accomplishes two things. First of all, it pushes back on what is too often criticism of the public sector. If people really understood all of the ways that government positively affects their lives, I think they'd have a different perspective. So when our employees talk about the positive things their organizations do, we can move the needle of public opinion about government. Also, by saying good things about where they work, it encourages others to consider public service careers. And of course, lower on the Maslow hierarchy, to refer back to what Melissa said, engaged employees are much more likely to actually show up for work. So let's I think this is our last audience participation. And I'm going to show you what research has identified as key issues for the future in the public sector. So again, we want you to pick two, and we're going to do this real fast, Jason, maybe in a minute, so that we can finish on time. But vote for two of these key issues. What do you think are the key issues for the future, again, in the public sector? And I'll show you what the survey conducted by the Center for State and Local Government Excellence found. Again, we want everybody to vote, but only once. How are we doing, Jason?
We're getting there. I'm gonna wait
Good to hear.
about 30 seconds.
There you go. Yeah, I'm counting down. Last chance. Okay, poll is ended. Again, this will not add up to 100% because we asked you to select two. We're all breathlessly waiting for the results. There we go.
Wasn't letting me share. Okay, should be up now.
Yeah, we got it. So employee engagement, 42%. That warms my heart. Employee development, 38.
That
Employee
warms my
morale,
heart.
33. Sure, right. So let's compare these results to what this national survey conducted by the Center for State and Local Government Excellence in cooperation with IPMA, HR, and the National Association of State Personnel Executives. Employee morale, 84%. Comp, 82. Engagement, 77. I'm not sure why they distinguish between morale and engagement. And recruitment and retention, employee development. So these are the top 5. There were like 30 listed, but these are the ones that were identified by more than 75% of the respondents. So the distribution was a little different than what you identified, but we only gave you 5 choices. So let me show you some of the data, 30 years of data, research. I can only share with you the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. So in 2 minutes, we're going to go over about 30 years worth of research. This is from Gallup. Gallup has an employee engagement survey that it has administered to millions of people, employees, primarily in the private sector, around the world. And here is Gallup's analysis across some key performance indicators, comparing the top 25% in their database of organizations in terms of engagement to the bottom 25%. So you can see high engagement, more productive, better customer scores, but look at turnover. Low turnover organizations, typically in government, we are low turnover. The biggest single difference, 65% less turnover in high engagement organizations. And this is the top and bottom 25%. If we were looking at the comparison between the top and bottom 10%, 5%, 1%, these differences would be even more dramatic. Our national survey, we do regular national surveys, 2,000 employees in a variety of occupations in the public and private sector to assess the level of engagement and understand what drives engagement. And we use this national data as our benchmarks for our clients to compare the results to. One of our questions is, my organization is successful at achieving its mission. You can see up to fully engaged employees are up to 3 times more likely to agree with the statement, my organization is successful at achieving its mission. I don't have a slide to show you this, but there are also significant differences in how satisfied people are about their lives in general. Fully engaged employees, much more satisfied with their lives in general than not engaged or somewhat engaged employees. So what happens to us at work, as we know, we've experienced it over the past 15 months, affects how we feel at home. How do we know if our employees are engaged? Well, our answer, and the answer of most organizations, is ask them. And at the Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement, we created the Institute to help public sector organizations measure and improve employee engagement. And one of the tools we use is an employee engagement survey to ask employees how they feel about the organization, their leaders, their supervisors, the culture of the organization, diversity, engagement, and inclusion, and even the COVID-19 environment. But then take action. When we ask employees to tell us how they feel, including whether or not they're thinking about leaving, we need to take action on the results. This is also from the Center for State and Local Government Excellence survey of HR directors and leaders this year, 2021. 77%, as we saw earlier, identified employee engagement as an important issue, but only 32% try to collect data. And if you don't have data, how can you act? I wrote a book entitled Engaging Government Employees, which I believe is still the only book to focus specifically on measuring and improving engagement in the public sector. But thanks, Jason.
I'll give you a shameless plug, Bob.
There you go. Available on from Barnes and Noble.
Available on Amazon.com.
I have another book here entitled, I didn't write it, entitled 180 Ways to Improve Engagement. So there are a lot of ways to improve engagement, but unless you understand what's going on in your workforce, what the level of engagement is, what drives engagement, it's going to be very difficult for you to take action that's going to make a difference. So 55 percentage point gap between organizations that said this stuff is important and organizations that are actually trying to collect data to understand what's going on in the organization. So key takeaways. We talked about the new world of work and how organizations, especially in the public sector, if we're going to compete for talent, I'm going to give you another anecdote. I read about this in the New York Times. Waste management company is now providing college scholarships to family members of their employees, not just their employees, but family members. And Waste Management is an organization that many local governments compete directly for talent. So we need to understand what this new world of work is and adapt to it. Challenges, we talked about them, but Melissa did a great job on the flip side. For every challenge, there's an opportunity. It's about data, right? Important to understand who is leaving and who is staying. It's not enough to say, well, we only have an 8% turnover rate, so we're in pretty good shape. That may mask other serious issues. So collect the data, analyze it, and drill down. There are a variety of approaches to drive retention and performance. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. We tried to share with you some examples from our national surveys, as well as the work that we do with individual organizations across the country, including helping them measure and improve employee engagement, to give you some examples. But there is no one-size-fits-all solution. It is really about data. Collect data, whether it's on turnover, who's staying, who's leaving, the level of engagement, what's driving engagement, analyze the data, and then act on the results. So I think we have some time for questions. We'll turn it over to Jason. Here's our contact information. Happy to have conversations with you offline, even if you just want to ask us a question. Also, if you want us to send you any additional information, including the report on our COVID-19 survey that attracted 20,000 responses, we also have some additional information about things like succession planning and onboarding. We're happy to provide you with those resources. So, any questions, Jason?
No questions have come in. Maybe they're coming in. Just a bunch of thanks and saying how amazing you guys did and that they're going to be sharing it with their managers. Let's see. Let's see if any other. They're asking if we'll be sending the helpful templates. If you want any of the templates, just like Bob mentioned, just put it in the exit survey when you log out of the webinar, when the webinar ends, and we can send them to you. I did do a printout of all the slides, and I already put them on the web, so they should be there if you want to grab those slides. It takes a few hours for the video to process, and it'll be there as well. But I think templates you mentioned were the
Communication,
the tracking,
planning,
communication plan, the tracking sheet,
and then the planning worksheet, which was a great tool for supervisors to be able to adapt and have a regular device to communicate one-on-one with their employees.
So if you want any of that stuff, let us know. And
also, I'm happy to provide you with a sample of our engagement survey if you want to take a look at the kinds of questions and categories that we include in our survey.
Definitely. I don't have anybody. I guess you guys were very thorough and answered everybody's questions.
I think we went fast. We were like a lot of information all in one download.
It's a lot to process.
Don't listen to it in 1.5 times speed. It'll make you explode. So we're at time. Thank you, Bob and Melissa, and everyone that joined us today. It was a fantastic presentation. Again, be sure to check out the website, cpshr.us/webinars for the recording. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Stay safe. Stay healthy.